Good morning, early birds. Welcome to the webinar. Thank you for joining us ahead of time and getting ready for the start of the webinar. A couple things I want to call to your attention before we start. First of all, I want to mention the fact that there are handouts available on the GoToWebinar control panel. Those handouts are the X7 documents, things like sales sheets and cut sheets and users manuals, etc. And those are available for your download throughout the presentation. Now also to mention, you will have the opportunity to download those materials directly from the website as well, because the X7 product page on the HornerAutomation.com website is going live today. As a matter of fact, it's going live right now. So by the time the webinar is over, you'll be able to peruse our website. The X7 will be included on the website, and those 5 handouts that are available for download from GoToWebinar will also be available on the website. And lastly, don't hesitate to type questions as you think of them. There's a questions pane or panel on the GoToWebinar control panel where you can type in questions, and at the end of the presentation we will definitely take a few minutes to answer any questions you might have. So don't hesitate to ask those questions and we'll get them answered for you. And once again, thanks for being on time. We'll be getting started within 5 minutes. Okay, once again, thank you for joining us on time. We will be getting started on the webinar here shortly. Going to give those who aren't as efficient as you all a chance to get logged in and set up for the presentation. A couple things I want to call to your attention. First of all, we do have handouts that are available from the GoToWebinar control panel. Those are 5 documents related to the X7, things like cut sheets, sales sheets, users manuals, etc. Today we are very efficient in that we also have launched live the X7 product page on HornerAutomation.com. So these same documents will be available from the website today as well, and then of course moving forward. Also, there's a questions panel available as well on the GoToWebinar control panel, and we encourage questions and we will answer those at the end of the presentation. Okay. So it's currently right at just maybe 1 minute after the hour. We will get started here in about 2 minutes. So once again, thank you for joining us, and we'll be getting started here in about 2 minutes. Thank you for joining us today for the X7 webinar. We won't be getting started quite yet. We're going to give folks about another minute or so to get logged in and ready to view the presentation. A couple things I want to point out on the GoToWebinar control panel. First of all, there is a handout section where you can download 5 documents related to the X7, things like sales sheets, cut sheets, users manuals, etc. Today, those documents are also available from the product page at hornerautomation.com, which has now gone live. So that's good information for you as well. And then very importantly, check out the questions section of the GoToWebinar control panel, because we highly encourage you to type your questions there, and we'll be answering questions at the end of the session. Once again, thanks for joining us, and we'll be getting started here in about a minute or so. Okay, welcome. I think it's time to get started. Once again, thank you for joining us today for the X7 launch webinar. We do appreciate the time you've taken out of your day to learn about this new product from Horner Automation. Joining me today, making sure that I don't run the Titanic into the iceberg, is Tyler Scheller, our marketing manager here at Horner. And the two of us are going to navigate through the new material for the X7. So thanks for joining us. A couple things I want to point out before we get started. There are 5 handouts available on the GoToWebinar control panel for you to download. Those are documents related to the X7, but those same documents can also be found on the X7 product page on our website, which has now gone live. And then importantly, please check out the questions pane or panel on the control panel as well, because that allows you to ask questions, which we will answer at the end of the session. Okay, let's get rolling. Okay, first of all, a quick reminder before we dive into the X7. Next week is our OCS factory training for the winter. It's housed here at the factory in Indianapolis. We're guaranteeing 68 degrees. I think a lot of us are going through the polar vortex right now, and 68 sounds pretty good. Of course, that 68 degrees is only guaranteed indoors and only as long as our heat holds out. So I think it will be considerably warmer next week than this, though. We still have a few seats available. And really, we continuously underprice this training. It's a fantastic 2.5-day session. We get great feedback from almost everybody who attends it. As sales channel partners, you're always welcome to attend for free, and your customers are always welcome to attend for either $150 a person, or they can purchase an XL controller for 50% off and get in that way. So again, fantastic values either way, and we encourage you to take advantage as we do have a few seats available. All right, let's dive into the X7. Okay, here's our agenda. Pretty similar to ones you've seen before. We try and be consistent and give you good information on the new products that we release. We're going to talk about, what is the X7? Where does it fit relative to other OCS products in the lineup? We're going to talk, of course, features, commercial details, how much does it cost, those sorts of things. We're going to talk about some of the competitors that you'll run into in this category. We're going to compare the X series with the XL series, because that's important. The X series is a distinct series from the XL series. They both have great value. They both have a lot of capabilities, but they are distinctly different series, and you need to be aware of those things. And then, as I mentioned before, we're going to have a questions and answer period at the end of the session. Okay, let's start with what is the X7. So the X7 is the newest X series Horner OCS, which currently includes the X2, the X4, and the X5, and now the X7. The X7 has a list price of $649 US. So again, fantastic value for a nice large graphic screen. It is definitely the lowest cost OCS that we offer that's in the 6 or 7 inch size, which again is very popular for those who like a little bigger screen than say a 3.5 or a 4. And the X7 does offer full OCS functionality. And if you compare it with the other competitors in its class, it outshines them for sure from a features and functionality standpoint. Now, in terms of where the X7 fits in the OCS lineup, let's take a look here. Now, on the left, you see the X series, the X2, the X4, and the X7. And the X7 is, kind of the top end of the X series. And then on the right, you see the XL series, which has a little more functionality. Certainly from units that are 7 inches and larger, they have more communication ports and audio video capability, which is something the X7 doesn't offer. And they offer a few more communications protocols, quite a few actually, than what the X series offers. But the X7 again is at the top end of the X series and is a great value for those straightforward machine control applications. Now I'm putting the X5 in kind of a special category here because even though the X5 is absolutely part of the X series, it was the first one we released, and it took its its basis from the XL series core. So the X5 is definitely offering the size and the style of the X series. No dedicated function keys, minimalist type design, but it does have the core processor of the XL series. So you'll see some of the extras that are only available on the XL series that are available on the X5, things like BACnet IP protocol and some of the other Ethernet IP, global tag exchange, those sorts of things are available on the X5 where they're not available necessarily in the X2, the X4, and the X7. So again, we've got the X series and the XL series, and the X5 is kind of even though a member of the X series, it's got a lot of characteristics of the XL series. Dimensionally, you'll see that the X7 is pretty compact. It's about the smallest unit dimension-wise that would still offer a 7-inch diagonal display. So it's only a couple inches deep, a little less than that actually, and about 7.25 by 5.5 tall. So in that range there. So again, a very compact unit. Really, it's a supersized version of the X4, which offers the 4.3-inch screen versus the 7-inch screen of the X7. From a physical standpoint, the X7 is washdown rated, so it's got a full NEMA 4X rating, and it can certainly be used in washdown type applications. As I just mentioned, it's got a very slim profile. It does mount with traditional mounting clips, from the rear of the enclosure or of the door, for instance. And like the rest of the X series, it's very efficient in its use of space and the fact that all the connections, with the exception of the micro SD memory slot, are done on the back of the unit. So again, very efficiently uses its space. From an operator interface standpoint, like the XL7, it does have the same resolution. So it is an 800 by 480 pixel display. And you can configure up to 250 screens with up to 30 objects per screen on the X7. And it accepts all the normal standard graphic objects that are available in Cscape, things like bar graphs, analog meters, trends, etc. Those are all supported. You can import custom graphics, whether they be bitmaps or JPEGs or maybe even scalable vector graphics, and it does support the Cscape symbol library. So those are all supported. It has slide-out function keys, like all the X series does. So no dedicated physical keys. It has this minimalist design where if you touch the upper right-hand corner, the function keys will slide out, and that function key graphic can be replaced by replacing the graphic as part of the firmware update. It's got a flexible font support capability, so if you need international fonts or maybe just bigger characters in a Western font, you can import those like you can with any OCS. It has pop-up keypads, so the appropriate pop-up keypad will appear whenever you're editing, say, a decimal field or a hex field or ASCII field, again, the appropriate pop-up keypad will automatically be selected and come up. And then, like the fact that the function key graphic is customizable, the splash screen is also customizable. Now, the X series, X2, X4, X5, X7, the X series is not designed for custom overlays. For custom overlays, if that's a critical element to a customer, to an OEM, then really the XL series is a better fit there. Now, that being said, you can tell that the X series is very plain in its look. And I think most OEMs would be satisfied with customization of the splash screen as well as maybe the function key slide out to provide what they need in order to get the customization that they want. Okay. From a logic CPU standpoint, of course, the X7 is a controller like all OCSs are. It has 256K of programming space. So that would be for logic. Now that compares with about, say, 1 meg for the XL7. So it's got plenty of memory compared with the other competitors in its class, but it is significantly less than the XL series, for instance. It has 5,000 word type registers and 2,048 bit type registers. It's got a very nice and quick logic scan rate that's great or less than 0.4 milliseconds per K. Certainly not as fast, again, as the XL series, but nice and snappy nevertheless. And it does support the full Cscape instruction set. So you can choose either ladder logic or full IEC programming. It supports, of course, floating point math, integer or double integer. And also it supports up to 4 PID loops that are auto-tuning if desired. So very capable logic CPU. Let's start taking a look at the I/O. Now, one thing you'll notice is that the I/O is really identical to that of the X4. So one of the nice things about the X2, X4, and X7 is that their I/O is very, very similar. And in the case of the X4 and the X7, the I/O is exact. So you've got either 26 or 30 built-in I/O points. The 26-point model features primarily relay outputs. The 30-point model features primarily solid-state outputs. You have I/O field terminals that are removable. The plugs can be easily removed with a small screwdriver. The plastic has been designed to accept the screwdriver to pry the plugs out very easily. The plugs themselves can accept either 14 or 24, from 14 to 24 gauge wire, and they are screw type, although they're not shown on the screen there. They're color coded in that the orange plugs are for the inputs and the analog I/O, and the black plug for the outputs. They're very nicely silk screened, both on the product as well as the plug. And then each connector has a different number of pins to reduce the chance that somebody's going to plug the wrong plug into the wrong socket. So again, nice full features on the I/O. And there's no jumpers to set. All the I/O configuration is done via software in Cscape. Taking a closer look at the digital inputs, both the Model A and the Model R have 12 24-volt digital inputs. They also can be used at 12 volts as well. 4 of the 12 are high-speed counting capable with frequencies supported up to 500 kilohertz. And just like on the X4, inputs 9 through 12 are the high-speed counting inputs, whereas on the X2, its inputs 1 through 4 are the high-speed counting inputs. As we take a look at the analog, like the rest of the X series, the X7 has 4 analog in and 2 analog out that support 4 to 20 milliamp signals with 12-bit resolution. The accuracy is plus or minus 1.5%, but that can dialed in significantly, or it can be dialed in significantly with field calibration, which the X7 supports and is recommended anyway for most machines, even with the XL series. And the analog I/O is 24-volt fault tolerant. So if you have a pressure transducer, for instance, which happens to short to 24 volts, the unit will absolutely not be damaged in that scenario. Now, the X7 on the analog input side, in addition to 4 to 20 milliamps, also supports RTD sensors with a limited range of -50C to 250C. So that takes care of environmental ranges as well as ranges that are appropriate for several food and beverage type applications, for instance. So it's nice to have RTD support directly on the unit. And it uses the third and the fourth RTD input utilize the same terminals, or they share the same terminals as the two analog outputs. So if you use all four RTD inputs, you lose both analog outputs, but you can mix and match. So you could, for instance, have 3 RTD in and 1 analog out, or 2 RTD in and 2 analog out. So you have the flexibility of using those I/O pins as you choose. Taking a look at the digital outputs, as I mentioned before, the outputs is where the two models vary. So the Model A is fully solid state, so no relays here. You've got 12 outputs, 2 of which can be used for high-speed signals, which could be PWM up to 65 kilohertz, or they can be used for outputs that are fired based on position, kind of a CAM type output. Stepper outputs are not supported, so for that you would need to upgrade to the XL series. And you see you've got a group of 4 and a group of 8 of the 500 milliamp positive logic outputs. Moving on to the Model R. Now the Model R primarily features relay outputs, so it has R1 through R6, which can support loads up to 3 amps. Now keep in mind, we only support, from a UL rating standpoint, only outputs up to 60 volts are supported. So 120 volts are not UL rated, which is unfortunate, but that's the way it is. And you've got, as I mentioned, 6 relay outputs in this case. Now, in addition to the 6 relay outputs on the Model R, you still have 2 solid state outputs. Now, these are not the traditional 500 milliamp sourcing outputs that we would use on our traditional Model A, for instance, but these are 2 syncing 500 milliamp outputs that can also be used for sourcing, but when you use them sourcing, they can only handle 2.4 milliamps. So that's something definitely to be aware of. So in general, you're going to probably be using these for, PWM outputs, or maybe outputs that are going to be connected to indirectly to a heater for driving a temperature control application. So syncing outputs are appropriate in almost all cases for those type signals anyway. And again, if you want step and direction, you'll need to upgrade to, say, the XL7, for instance. From a USB and serial communication side, like the rest of the X series, you've got a mini B USB port for programming purposes. You also have 2 serial ports on 1 connector, our MJ1, which is RS-232, and also can be used for programming, and MJ2 on the same connector is RS-485. You can do programming and firmware updates on either the USB port or the serial port. They are faster on the USB port, by the way. And then they can also be used, the serial port at least, can also be used for Modbus RTU master or slave protocol. So that could be used for adding smart mod I/O, for instance. And you can also use it to communicate with third-party variable frequency drives. And then in addition to Modbus capability, we also support ASCII send and receive, which you might use for barcode readers or receipt printers, where you just have that requirement for an application. All the termination and biasing is set from the system menu electronically. So again, no jumpers to set, no dip switches to set. And again, if you need serial protocols other than Modbus and a couple others, then you would want to upgrade to the XL series. Okay, going to the CAN networking capability. There is a single CAN port that supports C-SCAN protocol on the X7 that can be used for adding additional I/O, whether that be smart rail, smart block, smart sticks. It's a standard pin out for an RJ jack, so we followed the CAN standard there. Now it only supports C-SCAN, so if you need to support CAN Open, J1939, or DeviceNet, then that would be another reason to upgrade to the XL7, for instance. And network termination is set from the system menu electronically. No need to shove a resistor inside those tiny pins. From an Ethernet standpoint, the X7 has a full Ethernet port that supports Modbus TCP, master, and slave. It supports Ethernet IP as an I/O device, so you can absolutely hang a machine that's being controlled by an X7 off of a larger Rockwell network and have it be controlled by a Rockwell processor if necessary, indirectly over the network. And we also support Ethernet global data for the efficient moving of data from controller to controller. And then from an IT protocol standpoint, we support email as well as FTP file transfer, and WebMI support is coming in either the later this quarter or maybe early in the second quarter. So you'll be able to support WebMI with the X7 as well. Now, if you need other protocols on Ethernet, such as logic tag exchange, for instance, or BACnet IP, again, that's another reason to upgrade to the XL series because those protocols are supported there. Okay, other key features, like all recent Horner products, you've got a micro SD slot. This supports up to 32 gigabyte cards and a plan to support larger ones when needed. The X series is 24 volt only. The X2, X4, and X7 are 24 volt only, not 12 volt from the standpoint of power. Temperature rating is -10 to +60, and it has an IP66 NEMA 4X and UL type ratings, as we mentioned, with a Class 1 Div 2 hazardous location rating. And UL is complete for the X7. So the X2 and the X4 are currently shipping with UL Class 1 Division 2, and when the X7 ships, it will also be shipping with UL Class 1 Division 2 and the type ratings. Okay, let's take a look at the launch materials. The launch materials are available today at updated product pages on our website at hornerautomation.com. The sales literature is available for order. We've got technical documentation up there, and on the channel portal, which is accessible to all you folks who log in, you've got the X series price sheet, which has been updated to include the X7 that's up there today. From a pricing standpoint, both models are priced the same at $649, both the relay and the solid state version. And basically, just a reminder, there are no quantity limitations for the X series currently. So you aren't required to buy them by the box to get your standard distributor multiplier. They're available in any quantity. The X7 is available for order today. It will be shipping in late February in early production quantities, subject to allocation due to high demand. So we're anticipating this product will jump out of the gates pretty quickly. So you can place your orders immediately, which we would appreciate, and you'll start seeing units show up at your dock late in February. Okay, let's take a little bit of a look at the competition. Like the rest of the X series, the X7 is designed to compete with the lower cost competitors. So if we're looking strictly at an X7 standpoint, a couple to mention might be the Unitronic Samba series, as well as the Schneider Magellus SCU. And then, of course, separates from Automation Direct, where they might use a separate Koyo PLC and a separate Koyo operator interface. If we take a closer look at the X7 versus the Samba, the X7 or the Samba has a very low price between $500 and $599, so it's a little bit lower in price, but it's very, very limited. At that entry-level price, you do not get Ethernet, for instance. That has to be added at an extra cost. You don't get CAN either. That also has to be added at an extra cost. And it's very, very limited in terms of memory. If you peruse those charts there, you'll see the number of screens, the size of the program, and especially the number of variables are extremely limited on the Samba compared with the X7. And things like micro SD, for instance, are included on the X7 and not available on the Samba. So even though the Samba does carry a slightly smaller price, base price, the X7 has much more available and included there. If we take a look at the Schneider ProFace Magellus SCU, which is a nice product, no question. It's got good specifications, a nice I/O count. It's a fairly large physically. It's a two-piece design that installs through a push-button hole. And it's also relatively high price. So whereas the X7 comes in at $649, the SCU is going to run you either $950 or $1150 list price-wise. So even though it's a capable unit, we think that, especially because of the fact that the X7 offers pretty much the same features at a significantly lower price, we think that'll be attractive in that competitive situation. As we compare the X series and the XL series, this is important because I know some people, maybe some of you are out there thinking, well, geez, we'll no longer need to even worry about selling the XL7 anymore now that the X7 is available. And that could not be farther from the case. So let's take a look at these two series and see where they fit. So again, they do not compete against each other, they complement each other. And it's important to understand the differences between the XL series and the X series so you can appropriately recommend the appropriate model to your customers. Okay, let's start with the XL series. The XL series absolutely is the best in class for all-in-one control. It's got the most capacity, the highest performance, the best features. It's priced to compete with traditional solutions. We can compete with the lower cost solutions with the XL series, but its standard pricing is priced to compete with the traditional guys that are selling separates, or maybe the higher end all-in-one controllers. That way, the product is offered at a very valuable price. May not be the lowest on the market. It isn't the lowest on the market, but it offers a very good value and great functionality. And let's face it, if you're competing in a Rockwell scenario, you're probably not going to lose an opportunity to Rockwell based on price. You're probably going to lose for other reasons. Maybe the OEM or the end user are just they're just not willing to step outside anything that's very, very, very safe. Okay, so the XL series, again, it's best in class in terms of capacity, performance, and features. The X series offers great features and capacity, but it doesn't offer quite as much as the XL in those areas, but it is priced at a point which is very attractive to OEMs with straightforward basic machines. And it's priced to compete with those lower cost solutions we mentioned before from companies like Automation Direct and Unitronics and others, IDEC, for instance. Okay, so it is an entry-level product, which really kicks butt in entry level, but offers some nice functionality as well. Now, if we take a look at some of the numbers, okay, between the X series and XL series, you'll see some of the differences. Okay, so and let's compare the X7 and the XL7. So from a program size standpoint, the X7 has about a quarter of the capacity in terms of program logic. It also is about it's about a third as fast. So the XL7 is about 3 times as fast. The XL7 has about 10 times the amount of variables available, a little more than that, and it can support more PID loops. So as you can see, for an application that is more than just the basics, the XL7 does offer significant opportunities there for performance. From an operator interface standpoint, there are also significant differences. Many more screens can be supported on the XL7, and especially more objects per screen. So if you want to put a lot of information on a single screen, maybe in a table or a chart or something, the XL7 will support that much more easily than the X7. And as you can see, it has about 14 times more screen memory than the X7. It offers a little better performance in terms of screen switching, and it has dedicated function keys, which for some OEMs is important, and they like to customize those function keys for their application. From a built-in I/O standpoint, the big differences there are on the XL series I/O, you've got more choices. So you've got effectively the option of buying a unit without I/O at all, or with up to one of 5 different I/O options built in. Whereas the X series, you've got the Model A and the Model R with either 26 or 30 points respectively. But there's a lot of functionality there in that X series I/O, not to be sneezed at for sure, but for things like direct thermocouple support and some other functionality and other different combinations, the XL series offers more resolution on the analog, that sort of thing. From a communication standpoint, both products do very well, but you can see on the right there, the XL7 offers 2 CAN ports and 2 Ethernet ports versus 1 on the X series, and it also offers a lot more protocols than the X series does. But that being said, the X7 is certainly very capable with supporting, especially the fact that it supports Modbus TCP and Ethernet IP, and it'll soon support WebMI. Other features, data logging, for instance. The X7 supports modest data logging. So if you want to do traditional data logging, nothing real exotic, it will work very well. If you want to extensively data log with a lot of variables being updated very quickly, then the XL7 would probably be the better choice. From a firmware update standpoint, the X7 updates via a computer from Seascape over USB or 232, and the XL7 requires you to, or actually allows you to do the update strictly with a memory card, either micro SD or USB. So those are some differences there as well. From an environmental rating and agency approval standpoint, one of the big differences is that the XL series is available for the most part with extended ratings all the way down to -40. And that's available in the XLE, XLT, XL4, and XL7 sizes, whereas you do not have the availability or the option of extending the temperature rating down below -10 in the X series. And absolutely, If you've got an outdoor application, you should always lead with the XL series. It just has better ratings for those sort of applications. Okay, to summarize here what product to lead with in different situations. Lead with the XL series when your applications are somewhat complex, when speed is one of the most critical parts of the application, when the specifications of the I/O, such as analog resolution, etc., are very important, and in the toughest environmental conditions. Those are all reasons to choose the XL series. Also, if expansion is critical, you may have hundreds of expansion I/O, for instance. Customization is important, the ability to do custom overlays on almost every unit. If you're competing against a big traditional company solution, maybe you're going against Rockwell, you probably want to go ahead and compete. If it's against a traditional, big company PLC, you probably want to lead with the XL series there. Or if you're competing against a mid-level all-in-one, like a Unitronics Vision or Unistream series or the ProFace units, you may want to lead with the XL series there as well. Again, on the ProFace side, it really depends on the application. Is price the biggest thing, or is functionality the biggest thing? Because there are certainly cases where you're going to lead with the X series versus ProFace, as we've mentioned already. And then you're going to lead with the X series when price is the #1 factor. Okay, you've got a simple, straightforward application. They want a very cost-effective price, and you're competing against, in some cases, you're competing against entry-level products like the Unitronics Jazz and Samba, the low-end ProFace units, or a low-end embedded solution. You might have a OEM that has traditionally built their own microprocessor-based circuit board to do controls. The X series will have a price that may attract those companies to basically abort that strategy and go with something off the shelf. Okay, to recap, the X7 is our newest X series controller at a great value of $649. It offers a 7-inch color touch display. It's compatible with Seascape like all other OCS models. You've got 2 models to choose from, either the Model A with 30 points or the Model R with 26 points. It features micro SD and 2 serial ports with built-in CAN and industrial Ethernet. So again, all the functionality of an OCS, not quite the functionality of an XL7, don't forget about that, but compared with the lower cost competition, I'd say it blows them away quite well. All right, time for some questions and answers. I'm going to have Tyler go ahead and jump in now. Audibly, he can see the questions. I can't necessarily see those. And let's take a look at what we've got here.
Sure. The first person asks if the power for X7 should be 24 VDC plus minus 10% or 20%. The X2 and X4 is 20%.
That's a good question. And actually, I will defer to the data sheet for that one. More than likely, I didn't specifically look at the data sheet recently. It's probable that it's plus or minus 20%, but I'm not certain of that. So, but go ahead and check out the data sheet, and we'll get that answered.
Okay, and then Phil wonders if you can discuss the program portability.
Sure. So, if you've got a program which was developed for any OCS model, one of the advantages of OCS products, whether they're the X series, the XL series, or even one of our older OCS series products that maybe were even text-based, program portability is very good between our products. So more than likely you'll be able to use all the ladder logic, depending on what the graphics are between the unit you're moving from to the unit you're moving to. You may have some graphics work to do, you probably will. There may be some networking work to do, but in general, portability is very good between the X series and our other products that were out before them. So in general, you're starting probably with 80% plus of the application already developed. Just a matter of doing a little conversion on graphics and maybe moving some variables around, that sort of thing.
Let's see, and Donnie wonders if he can download his programs over LAN.
Yes, you can. So if you want to connect Seascape to the X7 over Ethernet, you absolutely can program it over that LAN port, that Ethernet LAN port.
And then lastly, Phil also wonders if anyone else is cold.
I'm actually pretty warm today, but they've got the heat cranked up here in the office or the conference room that I'm broadcasting from. So but it is pretty cold out there. I will say that. -degrees.
And that looks like, oh, nope, there's a few more now. Will the X7 cap at 4 PID loops or like the X4 does? And also, does the X7 cap at 16 trends like the X4 does?
My understanding is the answer to that is yes. So the answer is that it has the same limits as the X4.
Okay, wonderful. And then David's wondering if this PowerPoint will be available at any time.
Generally, we make the webinars available via video from the portal, the channel portal on our website, and we can also, in some cases, we do make the PowerPoint available as well. That would pretty much be by request, and make the request through your regional manager, regional sales manager, and we'll get you the PowerPoint. Sometimes we take a few of the slides out just to keep close control on a couple things, but in general, it should be available through your sales manager.
Okay, and that was the last question.
All right, very good. Well, thanks, guys. We do appreciate your time today and for joining us, and we look forward to a very successful product launch of the X7. And again, check out hornerautomation.com, the X7 product page, for more information. Have a great day.